Welcome to the Patriotic Pulpit. You know, one of the most discouraging things to see is the complete losing of America. America seems to be caving in on the inside. We have no borders. Just the other day, the story came out. We have something like 12,000 people crossing the border. This is the state of Texas. And you know, Texas has been a conservative state by and large, but we can't seem to get up enough strength and backbone to stop the flow of immigrants coming across our border. And you know, this has just been going on for as long as I can remember. Not only that, but we have censorship practiced by the mainstream media. If you don't think that's the case, then you just get on Twitter and you speak some things about your mind about some things, and you'll see very clearly that they're going to cut you off just like they have done so many people. If you question the election, when Trump lost to Joe Biden, you question the election. They're gonna kick you off of Twitter. They'll kick you off of any kind of social media. We have a censorship going on strongly in America. We have the same thing going on in the university and the campus levels, universities and colleges. Absolutely, they completely black out the conservatives, the conservative voice off the university campus. This is continually going on, and we're just losing America. We're losing the backbone to do anything. And one of the books that has recently come out is by Dick Morris, and it's called Corrupt: The Inside Story of Biden's Dark Money. Biden's dark money basically comes from China, but you know, it really gives you the inside story. It's a great book, and it gives you the inside story about what has been happening. That is the deep state that has been going on for many, many years. Matter of fact, decades is what's been happening. But let's just take it back for a few decades for just a moment. It was when Richard Nixon had opened up diplomatic relations with China 1972, led by Henry Kissinger, the globalist, who doesn't like America, never did like America, was always wanting us to lose our wars and get us into the wars in order that we might lose them and lose American blood and money. And so they opened up diplomatic relations with China. But there's something that we need to see, and that is that the chairman of the Communist Party at that time was Mao Zedong. He is the worst mass murderer in the history of the world. Over 20 million people murdered by Mao Zedong. And yet, nevertheless, Richard Nixon, a Republican, opened up diplomatic relations with China, and it began to give them access to all of the things, our trade secrets, our monies, the influencing of our colleges, the mainstream media, etc. And particularly, it gave them access to our politicians. For example, just Bill Clinton. If you talk about Bill Clinton for a moment, here I have a book I'm reading right now called The Year of the Rat by Edward Timberlake and William Triplett. It's just so clear what's happening here, that China, dark money, has been buying off the main politicians for a long time. But here's, to put in a caps on the story, is Dick Morris's book called Corrupt: The Inside Story of Biden's Dark Money. And it explains to us why America is drowning, why we are losing America. And we are losing America. But here is an inside story about how that has been taking place for the corrupt politicians, such as Joe Biden, who ought to be impeached, to say the least of it. And here's the thing. These facts have been known for a long time, and yet, nevertheless, it's taken the Republicans 3.5 years to get the ball rolling on talking about investigating Hunter Biden, and all they do is buck up against the authority and buck up against, just like Hunter Biden the other day. He's not going to go in, even though he had a subpoena from Congress. It's just, the whole thing is so corrupt. And how can people vote for Joe Biden is absolutely beyond my imagination. But getting ahead of myself on the story, Dick Morris tells a couple of things about Joe Biden, pretty interesting in the book. He tells, number one, that Joe Biden was the poorest senator to enter into Congress from the state of Delaware. The Biden family, of course, owns Delaware today, but he was the poorest senator when he entered into Congress. Now he's one of the wealthiest. He owns the state, and you don't cross the Biden family in the state of Delaware. Everyone in Delaware is afraid of the Biden family. It's a crime syndicate. It's a mafia. That's what's going on in America. And it would be that way across all of America in every single state if the country were small enough. Just as an illustration, Frank Biden, Joe's younger brother, killed a man in California. He went out to California, and Dick Morris tells the story. He goes out to California. He rents a Jaguar. Remarkably, however, he didn't even have a driver's license. Without a driver's license, can you or I rent cars without a driver's license? No, absolutely not. But he rented a Jaguar without a driver's license, and he was out having fun with the car, gunned the car, killed a man. Out of control people. These are people that are completely out of control. But did Frank Biden, his brother, Joe's brother, ever pay for the crimes that he committed? No, he didn't pay for the crime. He's scooted off somewhere else, helping out the Biden family do other things. Joe got Frank involved, for example, in rebuilding Iraq after we had the Iraq War. Then we go back and rebuild Iraq. And so even though Frank knows nothing about construction, Joe Biden got his brother Frank to help rebuild Iraq. Just like Hunter Biden, his son, knows nothing about the oil industry. He's nothing but a crackhead. He doesn't have anything going for him at all. He's a pornographer, and yet he sits on the board of all the wealthiest countries and makes decisions, and they have these shell companies that they move money around, and Joe Biden himself is on the take for it. It's just, this is a crime syndicate. You can't even fathom such a thing taking place. Even in like you might even read about mafia families in New York. They put all that, they put that in the shade. The Biden family is a huge, huge crime syndicate. And Dick Morris brings that in his book very good. Now, here's something else. Let's think about China for just a moment, then we'll take a break. China has had a stranglehold on American politics for about 50 years. But it began with Henry Kissinger. We talked about him in the last segment. A traitor to the United States, opened up diplomatic relations with President Nixon in 1972. And by the way, that was, remember, Mao Zedong, the worst mass murderer in history, has more murders on his record than anybody else. Complete communist dictator, and yet we opened up diplomatic relations with him. That's what Kissinger and these globalists want to do. But finally, that brought about the most favored nation status to China, which occurred in 1980, and that was brought about by President Jimmy Carter, who is another traitor to America as well. He helped give away Iran, so now Iran's our enemy, and that was under the Carter administration. Now, here's something else interesting regarding China. China had been behind Vietnam, and so we were fighting the North Vietnamese. They were funded by and sponsored by China. But how are we going to now open up diplomatic relations with them? But nevertheless, they did it, and the American mainstream media goes along with it, and so that set us up for the most favored nation status with China. Not only so, but China occupied Tibet. They drove out Chiang Kai-shek. The mainstream media helped that situation. They helped Chiang Kai-shek with his downfield blocking misinformation program to help American people think about, well, he's simply an agrarian reformer, Mao Zedong, and we need to support him. And so our government supported him, ostensibly supporting Chiang Kai-shek. But the real deal came out when we kicked Taiwan right out of the United Nations. We got rid of the most favored nation status with Taiwan, our friends, and we gave it to Communist China. So that was a stunning beginning of it with Richard Nixon way back in 1971. As a matter of fact, at that time, Bill Buckley in the National Review was absolutely critical about it. And in the agreement, the two sides working together with diplomatic relations, he pointed out that this official recognition is treasonous to America because we're kicking Taiwan out of the MFN status. We're withdrawing our military forces from the islands. It's hard to believe that Richard Nixon would do this, but nevertheless, that's what happened in Richard Nixon's period. And then Jimmy Carter signed MFN status for China in 1980, and the communists have been winning America ever since. Bill Clinton profited greatly from China, as I mentioned a moment ago. So when we come back, we want to ask the question, and Dick Morris answers these questions so perfectly, and that is, what does China get out of the most favored nation status and out of the money, the dark money that they continue to kick in to the Biden administration, the Biden family? Why the Chinese money into the Biden crime syndicate? And what does China get out of it? We'll be back in just a moment. China has been funneling dark money into the Biden crime family for a long, long time. Not only so, but it goes back through Bill Clinton, goes back through Jimmy Carter years, and goes back to when President Nixon opened up diplomatic relations with Mao Zedong, that is the dictator of communist China. And now China basically is owning the United States because it owns the executive branch of the United States. So what does China get out of it? Well, there are a number of things Dick Morris points out in his book. Number one, China has been let off the COVID-19 hook. This COVID-19 originated in Chinese labs, but the mainstream media, the Biden administration, all of the players in the Biden administration continued to lie to the American people, including Dr. Fauci, that all this had nothing to do with China, but they let them off the COVID-19 hook and didn't hold them responsible for it, and they're still not going to hold them responsible for it. That's one thing China gets out of it. They have a free range. Number two, Morris points out that there's a financial consortium of many countries, including not only China, but other countries in the Mideast, and their goal is to topple the U.S. dollar. And that's exactly what they're working on. South American countries, Mideastern countries, and all of these are working to topple the dollar, and they're doing it via the United Nations. And we, of course, are helping them do it because we print so much money that we don't have the money, and yet we continue to print it in order that we might give it to these nations, foreign nations, in unconstitutional welfare systems. But China's certainly behind that. Number three, Biden has allowed China to steal our technological developments. We have given access at the highest levels to trade secrets, manufacturing secrets, to Chinese spies, and we don't hold them accountable for anything. China continues to steal from the United States all of these technological secrets. And the Biden administration have made it easy to do by changing laws. For example, Biden changed patent laws. Patent laws used to be, patent laws, a great thing because it used to be the case. We had, I think Dick Morris points out in his book, we were number one in the world leading to protect patent holders in the United States. That is, people who made inventions, people who had inventions and they had a patent on it, then we protected them. But now we're number 38. We're not interested. The Biden crime family is not interested in protecting American inventors and American people. Why? Because they have opened the doors to China stealing not only our trade secrets, technological developments, but also patents as well. How about the stealing of our invention, all of our inventions with impunity? How about this one also? Millions and millions of dollars pour into United States universities. From where? China. China has over 350,000 students in the United States spying on the U.S. Defense Department. They're Chinese people buying land, companies buying land right next to Air Force bases, right next to Army bases. And in the universities, 350,000 students. I was shocked when I read that statement by Dick Morris. 350,000, and that is many of those, I don't know what exact number of it is, spy on the United States Defense Department. And here's something else interesting connected with that. The Biden administration personally dismantled the program that fought against Chinese espionage. You might wonder why the Chinese espionage continues growing apace, and it continues in America without any obstruction at all. Well, we had a series of programs in place that made it more difficult to steal, that is, from trade secrets, technological secrets. All of these were programs that we had in place, but the Biden administration single-handedly made it more difficult to prosecute Chinese spies, and that's exactly what's taking place. So, another brings up another point, and that is the fentanyl coming across our border, killing thousands and thousands of America, is actually sponsored by China. Who is really sponsoring it? The Biden crime family, along with China. That brings up how many millions of people has Biden let into this country? I remember when Biden took office, some of the estimates that I read were up to 20 million illegals in America. 20 million. Some say the lower estimates were 12 million illegals were already in America. When President Trump wanted to export them, get rid of them, you know, the liberals and the leftists, they screamed, they cried, they kicked their feet, and they whined and they complained, and they talked about how unchristian it was not for you to give your money to them, and that's how they see it. You know, that they're not going to give money. You check out how much Obama, for example, personally himself gives to charitable giving. What is it, something like 1%, 2%? No, he wants you to do the giving. And they call that, well, you got to open up your Christian charity boxes and your Christian hearts and give them money. Well, that was the way it's been going for a long time. And so when Biden got into office, personally, I think he doesn't want to make it possible for anybody such as a Donald Trump to win an election ever again. 12,000 people per day in America? And where is Texas? I don't know exactly the answer to all of these things and how to do it diplomatically, but I would say this. Texas doesn't seem to have a backbone to be able to say to the federal government, we're not sending you a dollar, not one single dollar of tax money from the state of Texas for anything because we're spending it on our border. And we're kicking out all the federal agents who are coming here cutting the wires on our fences. You know, we put up fences in Texas, and then the federal agents come and cut them because Joe Biden says, no, let them in, bring them in. And that's what's happening. Well, this is exactly what Biden wants to take place. It's not simply about Democratic voters. It is the collapse of America. It is the absolute decimation of America. It will make us another country completely when Biden is done. And the Republicans move so slowly to get anything done. He ought to be kicked out of office right away when he said, by the way, isn't the law that the president is to execute the laws of the United States? And the laws of the United States reads that we are to have a secure border. But he single-handedly dismantled, thumbed his nose at the law, said, we're going to do what we want to do. Right there, they had to kick him out of office. But no, we're going to play footsie with him. We're going to let the Jean-Claude Pierre, or whatever her name is, press secretary, tell us how we need to keep a better eye on things, and we're not paying attention. We don't really know the score and so forth, and we're losing our country just continually on a continual basis. It's so sad. Biden ought to be kicked out of office for it. Here's another thing. China has a monopoly on rare earth minerals, which our Defense Department relies upon. They own 80% of the rare earth minerals. And this is because Biden has given them the checkered flag, the go ahead, the green light, just go do what you want to do. Of all the things that really irks me, here's one, and I think, why hasn't the American people risen up in rebellion? Biden took our oil reserves and transferred them, in effect, to China. China now has more oil reserves than we do. Not only so, but in all of that, speaking about the oil industry, Biden administration lets them off the green hook. Where are the greenies? They want us to drive electric cars that you have to go and charge up every couple hundred miles, and you can't get anywhere. You can't do any farm work with them. You can't do any heavy equipment operating that way. They want us to be on electric vehicles, but the number one carbon emissions comes from China, and no one holds them accountable. What is China getting out of the money, dark money they send to Joe Biden? This is it. This is it. As a matter of fact, there are Democratic senators, AOC, for example. She has introduced legislation to continue to let China off the hook. We don't want to hold China accountable. What we're interested in is building up China. We have China's, by the way, China's also put an installation, a military installation right on the island of Cuba. And now you know why it is the case that China continues to buy up the land in America. How is it that foreigners can buy land in America? Foreign entities, foreign countries, even communist countries that are our enemies are buying up our property. How can that possibly occur? It occurs because we have a traitor for the President of the United States. That's why. Now, there are 14 or 15 items I listed right there that China is getting out of it. And I don't know the answer to all of it, except one thing: we need to have some strong Republican, conservative, constitutional person in the White House and roll back this. It has been going on far too long. We're about to lose our country entirely. And Joe Biden seems like he wants to get it done so quickly before there's a possibility of losing an election next year. That's exactly what he's trying to do.